Good morning to everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this workshop, to this webinar, which is hosted by the University Center of Brasilia. And it is an honor to have such a distinguished panel of professors from many countries and from a very diverse cultural background who have kindly accepted my invitation in order to present their experience in discussing the topic being a law professor as a woman. My opening statement will be very short and will be twofold. I shall firstly explain the origins of this project before introducing our panelists. Turning to the first part, the origins of this workshop might sound quite ordinary to your ears. I act as a law professor at the University Center of Brasilia in Brazil. And under this title, I have had the chance, the opportunity to be invited in many public and private universities in Brazil from north to south. And something has always struck me in my interaction with my female colleagues regarding a sort of latent sexism at university, which I did not know existed in such a way in Brazil. And this sort of very latent sexism seems to be mainly related to power relations with their male colleagues. And there is also a running comment I have often heard from my female colleagues when we compare our teaching experience over a cup of coffee. They would always say that they tell the students exactly the same thing which I told them, for example, in terms of legal method, but that these students would pay more attention to my statement because I am a man, and besides because I'm a foreigner. So I must admit that at first, such prejudice was to me very subtle and not so easy to identify to the naked eye. But from their statement, it was still very clear and taken for a fact that their experience hinted at some form of sexism which they have to deal with on a daily basis, be it at a horizontal level with their colleagues and sometimes at a vertical level with their own students. Of course, I'm not generalizing their experiences and affirming that what I said is the state of art in law faculties in Brazil. I'm here only referring to how I personally got in touch with this issue of sort of differential treatment of these female colleagues in an environment, as I mentioned, where I thought it would be absent in Brazil, that is at university. Surely it was my innocence to think that way. But then in 2019, after the last elections, something happened which was less subtle. And it seems that voices from the underworld of prejudice were somehow unleashed and they became unbridled in society in general, with a conspicuous reflection in the academic world. I think that Patricia Perroni, my colleague, will speak longer on this point. And we do have colleagues working on these questions from a gender perspective. And my aim in calling for this workshop was maybe less technical and maybe less ambitious, because the idea of this webinar was to have a platform where colleagues from different countries, different legal systems, and different cultural backgrounds could share and socialize their respective experiences as law professors. And the objective, therefore, is not as such to make a political statement, but more simply to present, to understand, to discuss, and to share these experiences. And this leads me to the second part of this opening statement. Many colleagues worldwide answered positively to my invitation, and we are very glad and honored to have all these professors from different continents with us today to share their experience in being a law professor. And I would therefore like to thank and introduce the following panelists for their participation. Firstly, Professor Patricia Perroni from the University Center of Brasilia, the host university in Brazil. Professor Magdalena Bass from the Universidad de la República of Uruguay. Professor Carolina Olate from the University of Javeriana, Colombia. Professor Virginia Georgieva from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México from Mexico. Professor Afton Titus from the University of Cape Town, South Africa. Professor Ranjana Ferrao from the Sargakar College of Law in Goa, India, Professor Humana Islam from the University of Dhaka in Bangladesh, Professor Bashayal Majed from the University of Kuwait, Professor Leila Shukroon from the University of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom. And I would also like to thank Professor Ishan Daoud, who has kindly accepted to be our debater today. Ishan is a doctoral researcher in legal education at the University College of London, and he shall report on the debate today. And the order in which I have introduced our panelists will also be their respective order of intervention, and they shall have 15 minutes each. So this said, I thank you for your very kind attention, and I'm more than keen to leave the floor to my colleague Patricia Perroni from the University Center of Brasilia to open the discussions.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Do you hear me? Okay, I want to begin by thanking Professor Nitish for the invitation to this event. I think it is a quite important initiative, and I must say that my female students are quite excited about it. And yesterday there has been an intense exchange of messages concerning this webinar. I also greet all the professors who will participate in it. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I begin this exposition confessing that it was quite difficult at the beginning for me to organize it, because although it is clear that we have a greater presence of men in law academy, in master and doctorate programs, and law seminars, and doctorate and master boards. Although this is a very clear reality, it was quite difficult to think of the various dimensions in which it is different to be a male professor or a woman professor. And I concluded that my difficulty is not a consequence of the considerable equality between men and women in Brazil, but just the contrary. It is a consequence of the naturalization of a deep inequality between men and women in Brazil. And because of this, I decided to divide my presentation in 3 parts. The first part concerning personal gender limits that I faced in my private life, and that are connected to the way I behave as a woman professor. The second part connected to other gender limits that I faced in broader professional contexts. And the third part concerning the experience as a woman professor, because when you get to be a woman professor, you arrive at this point of your career with all the background and all the experiences that you had before, and that frame your behavior as a woman professor. And to understand the differences and the limits that you face as a woman professor, it is quite important to understand some cultural issues that might not be present only in Brazil, but that make difference on the limits that women face. So first of all, in what concerns personal gender limits experiences, of course, my experience is not a universal experience, but I think that I'm quite representative of the majority of a considerable part of women professors in Brazil. And first of all, there is a kind of a family division of labor according to gender. So care for children, care for elderly, care for sick, and care for home is up to women in Brazil. And this is not just a family norm. This concerns to values that are introjected and that make women consider essential to be involved in those tasks. So I confess that I always feel indebted on a personal level, and I always have the feeling, for example, of not being doing as much as I should concerning my children, concerning my home, and this is already a considerable limit in what concerns to professional issues. There is a considerable, what I mean is there is a considerable burden concerning the level of domestic work and the level of domestic care that is expected from a woman, and that even women consider that they should be doing. There's also a family perception considering those tasks that should be natural for women, that they should look for jobs which are compatible with family care and with safe maternity leave. So they should be looking for public jobs that could guarantee short periods of hours working, or longer periods of maternity leaves. When I graduated, for example, I considered taking an LLM abroad, but was convinced that I should go for a public competition to get a job as a public servant, to get a job as a public lawyer for the state of Rio, because getting a public job as a state lawyer of Rio would give me more opportunities than getting an LLM abroad, since it was not probable for law firms in Brazil to accept women as partners. It was this way for my generation. It was very uncommon to have a woman as a partner. Nowadays, it is not anymore, although they are very pressed not to take, for example, maternity leaves, or to take shorter maternity leaves, and to behave more like a man on their professional environments. So I just thought it was important to explain a bit of these of this cultural background and cultural gender limits, because they in a certain way frame, even unconsciously, the expectations and possibilities that Brazilian women still have in what concerns to professional issues. Then I go to the second part of my exposition, which concerns to the other limits that I've faced in a broader professional context. And then I would say that incentives for women inclusion are very low, and were even lower when I was beginning. For example, I had my child on the eve of my second exam to enter a Brazilian master course, and the university refused to apply me the exam in the maternity hospital, saying that this would violate the right to equality to the other candidates who had not had a child on the eve of the exam. I had my second daughter, when my second daughter was born, she had a severe vision problem, and I was advised by my superior to quit my job, to go home and to take care of her, because there is this apprehension from employers that women will privilege their kids, their homes, their family, and not their careers. And they are very frightened to have problematic women in their teams. Maternity leaves, even in the public sector, can be an issue considered for promotion. And so this is not a formal rule, but informally, if a woman is competing with a man and she has taken successive maternity leaves, they can, it's not improbable that they consider that the man should be promoted before her, because he had severe burdens more burdens than her, since a man would not take maternity leaves. And also professionally, social interaction that builds professional relationships and help you evolve in your career. In Brazil, they're quite male social interactions. So, for example, my experience as a state lawyer, in this experience, the social interactions happened in the weekends in soccer matches, or in happy hours after work for drinking beer. And since Brazilian women do not play soccer and avoid going out for beer after work because they have to meet other domestic demands like children. Normally, women professionals have lower social interactions, and this interfere in their development and in their career development. So we have limitations. In the personal level, we are born and raised considering that there are other tasks that we should face, and that are natural tasks that are a considerable burden. And also in any professional environment that you go, there are other aspects in which these gender differences are reflected. And now this takes me to the third part of the exposition concerning how it is to be a woman law professor in Brazil. So you arrive to be a professor, a law professor in Brazil after going through all of this and with this background and experience, and you already expect things to be different. You don't even realize that they are different. The law academy environment is an environment absolutely dominated by men in Brazil, at least in what regards to doctorate and master programs. Here in Brasilia University Center, where I work, for example, we have 28 professors in the master's and doctorate program. And among these 28 professors, only 4 professors are women. And this is not because the university selects on the basis of gender. It is because women have to face such hard limits to finish the training that they need to become a master or a doctorate professor, that this is already a very powerful filter. It was until recently very common to have entire congresses or panels of such congress in the most different universities, only integrated by men. The same occurred also with examining boards of candidates for master and for doctorate programs. Only very recently, these having congresses or panels without a single female became something embarrassing. And in fact, some groups began to devote themselves to denouncing and criticizing those panels who didn't have women in social media. Networks for supporting professional practice of women were created also, and to spread information about events that did not have women, and to stimulate the inclusion of women. And currently, but this is something very recent, even the most conservative events try to have at least one woman per panel, not because of a preoccupation of inclusion, but more because of a preoccupation of image and of not being criticized in social media. But even though this is an involvement considering what we had in the past, Male professors also, a few male professors also mobilized to promote the inclusion of women. My first invitation as a exhibitor and an international congress was the result of a male professor saying that he was invited to the organization of the event, that he was invited to a panel that only had men, and that this was a situation that was no more acceptable. Male professors, not every male professor is prepared to interact or to debate ideas on an equal footing with women professors. Sometimes during the debate, some inadequate jokes or comments concerning the private life of women professor arise. There's also a tendency already measured by studies pointing that there is this behavior of male professors to interrupt women professors while they are speaking in a way and in a number of times that they would not interrupt male professors and that male professors would not accept. My time is over, so I'm just finishing, saying that also in the division of labor in the academy, there is a gender difference. Organizational tests, executive tests are delivered to women, although at the same time, the good time for thinking is left with men. Women are not well seen if they are as aggressive as men in seeking for visibility. And finally, in classroom, it can be sometimes difficult to control some students, especially old men students who already have an important position in their careers are very resistant to accept the authority of women professors. So in conclusion, academic environment in Brazil is not equal at all. There is a greater presence of male professors. There are issues of work division and recognition, but at the same time, this is an issue that is evolving. Things are better now than they were before. There is an effort in including women and in opening space for women, but there's a lot of work still to be done. And sorry for a bit of passing a bit the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patricia, for kicking off this round of discussions and for your very clear and precise insight of the Brazilian, at least law faculty, not to say university background in terms of women's experience. This said, I shall leave the floor to Magdalena Braz from Uruguay. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So, thank you so much, Nitish, for the invitation. It is a great pleasure for me to be here today to meet these wonderful women. And I'm sharing with you a presentation because I would like to share with you some photos. You see it okay? Tell me, please. Okay, thank you. And so, being women professors in the field of international law, I'm going to talk about the B side. Being women law professors is challenging. We all know that. Patricia said it very, very well. She explained, and she was very brave when she was explaining it. But maybe it is just as challenging as in any other profession, but it has a B side that sometimes is as relevant as the A side. I'm showing you these photos because I'm an amateur photographer, so I would like to use my photos as a common thread. Most of them are in black and white and from different genders. So in order to understand the B side, we should start by asking ourselves what the A side of being women law professor is. For the purpose of answering this question, I will borrow journalism's 5 W's. In the field of international law. Regarding the A side, being a female law professor is pretty much the same as being a male professor. We have to accept that. The teaching and learning process in COVID-19 times requires, I think, 3 elements: disciplinary knowledge, public international law and international relations in my case, but also an interdisciplinary lens that allow us to explore the contours of international law and international relations, as well as the dialogue with other disciplines. Number 2, didactic methods. In my case, I follow meaningful learning theory. And number 3, digital skills. For example, the use of Zoom or other platforms, Kahoot, social media, or multimedia resources. Now, who are the main protagonists in the teaching and learning process? As I say, I follow the meaningful learning theory from Ausubel. He said that the students have a main role, while professors are facilitators who build bridges between a student's prior knowledge and the new concepts. It's a kind of network of concepts. Where do we teach? Well, I have to say that I am part of the global south of many of us, and I believe that geography shapes and reshapes our teaching. Of course, we are global citizens, but the place where we learn and the place where we teach shapes the way we understand the region.
Eita.
I think that Magdalena had a connection issue. She might come back in a few seconds. Let's just wait for her. If not, if the problem persists, maybe I will leave the floor to Carolina afterwards, but let us wait for a few seconds.
Although other options are perfectly valid, we teach because it is our vocation. Teaching gives sense to our lives. So, let me see. No presentation? Something happened with the presentation?
Yeah, I think you were disconnected for a few seconds, and I think this disconnected your PowerPoint presentation. So maybe you should
go again.
You should start the slideshow again.
So perfect. Do you see the?
We do now.
The photo here, calle sin salida or dead end? Yes. Okay. So I talk about the A side, but the A side is not a dead end. We have the B side. So I would like now to focus on the B side of being women professors in the field of international law in the global south and during COVID-19 pandemic. So I really enjoy Patricia's presentation. She says something that is the truth, I think. It is clear that during the last years, rather than showing a decrease, discrimination and misogyny increased. Experiences regarding glass ceilings and sticky floors are part of every woman's careers in academy. but discrimination is not an exclusivity of the academy, it's a reflection of the society. We have a cultural bias, as she said. Polarization in social media and virtual spaces is a new element for university teaching, especially in times of virtual teaching and learning. Unfortunately, this is part of the A side. So I would like to focus on the B side now. I'm here readdressing the great Diana Tussi's words. Diana Tussi is a professor of international political economy from Flaxo, Argentina. She always says that women work with passion, emotion, and affection. And we, as women, are criticized because of that. I propose 3 elements for the B side of being law professors: creativity, emotion, and needing of affection. So let's start by creativity. As you may see in my academic and personal life, photography has a crucial role. It is a way I found to develop creativity and, let's say, think in different ways. I'm not a professional photographer, I'm just an amateur, but I could affirm that my camera, I have it here, yes, that my camera, or sometimes my mobile phone, is an extension of my arms and eyes. Why photography? Well, as Susan Sontag states, I'm going to quote her, the force of photography is that it prolongs instants which the normal flow of time immediately closes. This freezing of time is what produces beauty. But the truth cannot be revealed in a dissociate moment, however privileged or decisive. So, although photography is only a representation of the truth or the reality, at the same time, it's a way to express thoughts and feelings, and it's a way of creating or discovering beauty. At a higher level of abstraction, I found in visual international relations or visual global politics a way of seeing, creating, and teaching. For example, in my teaching experience, the use of photographies or other visual artifacts as films, series, political cartoons, and so on. I really recommend and strongly recommend this book by Roland Bleicher, that the name is Visual Global Politics. As we live in a world of images, introducing images in teaching is a way of speaking our students' language, given that they are digital natives who regularly communicate through images of different sources. Roland Bleicher proposes an aesthetic turn in international politics. This turn can be extended to international relations or international law, and the didactic use of visual artifacts may also help us to overcome that tendency to mimesis, that is, to approach international facts as they are, when there is an object represented and a representation of it. We can see that in these 3 photos. This is the same building from the first slide. This is Salvo Palace, Palacio Salvo in Montevideo, from 3 different points of view, and it is still the same object. So photography is a way, as a woman teacher, as a woman professor in international law, to express creativity, to think in different ways. So finally, the 2 other elements, emotion and needing of affection. Emotion, well, I may say that the personal path and the academic paths are not divergent. We sometimes think that they are divergent, but I think they are not. They cross in different moments of life under diverse contexts and following different objectives. Our personal life benefits from emotions. For women, emotions has a leading role in being a lecturer, and I think for men also. Patricia said something similar. In a misogynist society, it is not accepted because it appears to be less professional. But it is not. It's professional. It's perfectly professional to be emotional. Moreover, I think that emotions lead the way to our research agendas, explain why we research, what we research, ISDS in my case, and challenge us to break with traditional theories and embrace new paradigms in law. It could be illustrated through Martha Feynman vulnerability theory. If you are not familiar with Martha Feynman theory, I strongly recommend to read her. Their papers are really good. And she proposed a different law paradigm that is focused on human being as a vulnerability and dependent, as a vulnerable and dependent subject. Needing of affection. As you may see in the photo, I think that feminism is a building force, but as women, we know that we are not only stronger together, but also better persons and better professors. Thus, here the word needing describes the thread of affections that we need during our lives and all over the world, with women and men, such as students, colleagues, assistant professors, heads of departments, tutors, friends, and so on. I may say that our work is a kind of needing, a global needing of affection. These elements also boast another ingredient of the B side of being an international law professor from the global south, the deep necessity of rebalancing the Western bias, as well as the gender bias in international law and international relations. Our global need of affections, it's built throughout the world, including agendas, approaches, and theories, also from the periphery. This focuses on the book Whirling Beyond the West by Tickner and Weaver. So, to put it in a nutshell, creativity, emotion, and needing of affection conform the B side of being women professors in international law. As I mentioned, I think that our work is a kind of global knitting. Therefore, I would like to conclude with a text by Eduardo Galeano, an Uruguayan writer. I'm going to read it in Spanish because I think Spanish is really musical. So I'm going to use my language and my mother tongue. And after that, I translate into English. He said, quien escribe teje. Texto proviene del latín textum, que significa tejido. Con hilos de palabras vamos diciendo, con hilos de tiempo vamos viviendo. Los textos son como nosotros, tejidos que andan. In English, those who write need. The word text comes from the Latin expression textum, that means knitting. With threads of word we speak, with threads of time we live. Texts are like us, knitting that walk. So I hope this presentation works as an invitation to knit our path together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Magdalena, for your presentation, which contain elements of photography, but also of poetry, in my view. So we shall continue the navigation over the South American continent. And I shall now leave the floor to Carolina Olarte from the University of Javeriana in Colombia. En passant, Carolina Olarte is the first dean of the law faculty the first female dean, sorry, of the law faculty of her university. So Carolina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Nitish, Patricia, Eshan, and all the organizers for giving us the chance to discuss what it means to be a female law professor and to identify from our experience bias in the academy for female law professors. I'm also very honored to be in this all-feminine panel discussing women's presence in academia in order to exchange some of the challenges we face. In my case, sharing the Colombian context hopefully will help to build the bridges and who knows, maybe even to find some solutions. It is also an honor being part of this panel because these distinguished colleagues represent countries in different central and peripheral regions of the world. As it was mentioned, this workshop will discuss hurdles women face in academy in general and particularly in the law field. I would like to share with you my personal experience as a female lawyer and a law professor for the past 16 years. I began my studies in 1996 at the law school of a private elite university run by the Society of Jesus, a Catholic university. 60% of my classmates were women, and in my entire 5-year career, I only had 3 female law professors. 2 of them were assistant professors of a male tenured professor, and the third one directed an optional chair in human rights, which, by the way, was accessed by a maximum of 3 students per semester. My university was created in colonial times in 1623, and then with the various expulsions of the Jesuits from Latin America, it was restored in 1930. The Faculty of Juridical Sciences, as my law school is known today, began its functions in 1931. And this year, in 2021, we are celebrating our 19th anniversary. After those 90 years, this is the first time that a woman has been the head of the faculty. The deanships have always been in the hands of men, and I, for the first time, assumed the deanship of the faculty last year in April. Of course, it is great novelty that a woman is a dean. In addition, I am considered especially young, although we have had deans a year younger than me. Apparently, youth lasts longer in women, and that translates to a lack of experience, apparently. Let me tell you a little about the context in which today we have female lawyers and female law professors at Javeriana University. The story began in 1941 with the creation of the so-called feminine faculties. In 1941, Javeriana University feminine faculties opened their doors. The opening of careers such as law and philosophy in the feminine faculties was a proposal that was welcomed by a group of women who, supported by their families, will become part of a pioneering generation of women who would have to start their respective professional practice without yet having the full exercise of their political rights, which would take a while to be recognized in 1954. However, these women were an active part of the discussion and conquest of full citizenship for all Colombian women. So from the university classrooms and with their graduation thesis promoted the study of women's rights. The first female graduates who are registered in our School of Law are 2 women in 1946. As of 1994, women represent more than 50% of the graduates of the law school at Javeriana University. Of course, all their law professors were men, and only until the 80s did a first woman appear as an assistant professor supporting a main male professor during his absence in some sessions. The context of women who teach law has progressed relatively. Today, our law school has 49 full-time professors, of which 37 are men and only 12 are women. And the average age of women professors is 39 years. If we move to adjunct professors, we have 226 professors, of which only 61 are women. 33 people make the administration staff. 23 of them are women. The majority of them are secretaries, and only 3 of them occupy managerial positions. Let's now talk about specifically of what happens in the classroom. Law is conceived as a scene of strong people with determined temper and above all who speak loudly. In a sense, many people and many professors present the practice of the legal profession almost like a Roman circus, where the great lawyer gladiators should go and fight against the lions. That makes it look like a profession of very strong people, usually identified with the masculine gender. In fact, a good part of the classes that have to do with human rights or alternative dispute resolution mechanisms such as negotiation, conciliation, and mediation are headed by women. Arbitration does not enter there, of course, because it is considered a different scenario from the previous ones. And there we do have many men as professors. Therefore, from the classroom, a bias is being generated for students with respect to the roles of women and men in the legal profession. On the other hand, when we analyze the evaluations that students carry out about their professors, we find that they are much more severe with women than with men. Those women who achieve high scores, like most men, are those who receive comments considered favorable by students, such as strong and determined professors. Those who receive comments regarding their maternal instinct, which generates closeness with students, receive lower scores. This quality appearing something less interesting than severity. The scenario is somewhat complicated if we place that in the Latin American context. Things do not improve. Latin America and the Caribbean, women are more than half of the population, but only 30% are in parliaments, 15% in city administrations, and 32% in Supreme Courts. And there is another gender challenge. Unfortunately, we still find academic idioms where there is no awareness on gender bias regarding panelists. However, not everything is so negative. This evident bias in the working lives of women law professors also generate important opportunities to create networks that make women work visible and allow us to discuss the challenges that each one faces, making us stronger globally and together. As women law teachers and professors, we have the commitment to open more spaces so that we can be points of references for our male students and especially for our female students. The role of female law professors in teaching as well as in university government duties is important. Since it allows us to inspire young female students and scholars and to show them that they may occupy direction and decision-making places in the future. As the late Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg put, women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. Our graduates have become role models. We see with satisfaction the participation of our Javerianas female lawyers in the highest public positions in our country. Colombia has the first vice president woman, and she is a Javeriana Law School graduate and the former female professor in our law school. We have seen women leading peace building scenarios too, in the business world, in the academia, and in litigation. So even though there is still a lot of work to do, we are in a good path in our schools of law. We owe ourselves the commitment to continue opening these spaces for female law professors and to erase the existence of this evident bias in the academy for female law professors. These are just some aspects of the reality of women as law professors at my university, but I'm sure that they reflect the reality in much of the university world in Colombia and all over the world, in many parts of the world, as we have heard in this workshop from Patricia and Magdalena's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for the Colombian experience. It was very, very interesting. And concerning some points, we could find some correspondence with what Patricia said as per the Brazilian experience. I will now call upon Virginia from Mexico for the Mexican experience.
Thank you, Nitish. Well, first of all, I also would like to thank Professor Nitish Monoburum for the invitation to participate in this important intercontinental and intercultural meeting. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to meet all my wonderful colleagues. I would start saying that as a law professor and a woman, I know my rights. And my rights as a woman law professor are protected by the university where I work, the National Autonomous University of Mexico's internal legislation. The National Autonomous University of Mexico, and especially the law faculty and the Institute of Legal Research, have now implemented many particular programs and initiatives to improve gender equality and to sanction gender-based violence against women. Both institutions now have special commissions for gender equality. The university itself has created a center for multidisciplinary gender studies and a specialized unity to denounce violations of women's human rights. The university has also adopted a protocol for the attention of gender-based violence cases, which was proposed by the general lawyer of the university, which in 2018 was a woman. The protocol set up precise rules about the forms of gender-based violence and established effective proceedings to protect the victims. However, it is very interesting to mention that the Commission of Gender Equality was first wrongly called Commission of Gender Equity. This was very significant as the university has promoted many good practices in gender parity employment programs. The labor force participation of women as law professors is now close to 50%. The Institute of Legal Research, where I work, has reached in recent years an almost complete gender parity, as 50% of the researchers are women and the resting 50% are men. However, we know that gender equality cannot be measured in numbers, and there are still many challenges for the achievement of the equal access of men and women to academic opportunities at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Women still get a less fair and equitable treatment than men. Thus, for example, the Institute of Legal Research hosts 12 law reviews or law journals. Only 2 of their directors or editors-in-chief are women. The dean of the institute has always been a man, and at present, only the vice dean is a woman. The dean chair of the law faculty of the university has been occupied by a woman in one single occasion in more than 100 years of history. At present, the dean and the vice dean are both men. The dean of the National Autonomous University of Mexico has never, absolutely never, been a woman. That brings some important limitations to the career opportunities of female law professors and researchers. Lesser professor jobs are more accessible for women, but the top jobs seem to be gender stereotyped as male. In the second place, although the legal framework for the attention of gender-based violence against women at the university is very robust and has been recently consolidated, in practice, as it may appear in law in general, there is an important lack between its normative content and its efficient implementation. There is still much more to be done to eradicate this type of violence within legal academia in Mexico. Unfortunately, as a woman and law professor, I have been victim of some understated forms of gender-based violence that are prohibited by the protocol principally in the form of jokes with strong sexual connotations. For example, once a male law professor told me how good I was. And in Mexico, the expression, "que buena estás," has strong sexual insinuation. I have also experienced, and my other colleagues were also referring to the same, I have experienced discriminatory tactics in academic meetings, for example, where some male work colleagues use openly hostile and prepotent gestures or speeches to criticize my works or my legal arguments. Patricia was saying that interrupting is also a form of gender-based violence. I have never suffered, fortunately, physical gender-based violence at the university, but I do know about many cases of consorts, law professors, who have been subject to sexual harassment and unwanted physical contacts from male colleagues, or have been told that their way to dress, for example, is inappropriate for a lawyer or for a professor in law. I also know from my experience in legal teaching that there are not enough positive discrimination practices in favor of women at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. My first labor contract as law professor ended while I was pregnant in the 9th month with my second daughter without any further justification, only because the dean of the law faculty changed at this time. In general, there are insufficient leaves for pregnancy, sickness, or disability. The maternity leave in Mexico is for 3 months, which, in my opinion, is very insufficient. There are not special breastfeeding rooms, breaks, or other supportive facilities at the university. When my second daughter was a baby, I was breastfeeding her in a small garden in front of the university where my students were taking their lunch. I also would like to stress that it is much more difficult to be a law student as a woman than being a woman law professor in Mexico. There have been much more cases of gender-based violence against female law students, such as sexual jokes and comments, inappropriate messages, verbal violence, and other types of abuses from male law professors. Many law professors in Mexico still address their classes with "hello boys" or "hello confreres," "hola muchachos," "hola compañeros." I recently learned about a case where a professor in international human rights law, I repeat, international human rights law, had a baby with one of his students. After the birth of the boy, he refused to pay child maintenance and started a legal persecution against his female student. However, he still works and he holds a very important position at the university. So there is a lot of hypocrisy in the attendance of this type of gender-based violence cases. The fact is that it is difficult to be not only a law professor as a woman in Mexico, but to be a woman in Mexico per se. According to the OECD, Mexico is one of the organization's member states with the highest levels of violence against women. In Mexico, 63% of women over the age of 15 say they have been victims of some type of violence during their lives. At least 10 women are murdered every day in Mexico by men. The impunity in feminicides, violence, and misogyny are systematic and repeated features of the Mexican legal, political, and social system. Mexican women continue to perform unpaid domestic work, face employment discrimination, earn less than men, and live in conditions of extreme poverty in many rural areas. After the lockdown measures adopted by the Mexican government to fight the pandemic provoked by the global spread of COVID-19, there has been an increase in gender-based violence against women, and April 2020 marked a record with 268 murders of women per month. However, the Mexican president has insisted that all data related to these cases are completely false. In this sense, I think that being a law professor as a woman in Mexico creates ipso jure and ipso facto an important responsibility to teach and to believe in law as an instrument for social change and to promote, as we are doing it right now, openness, debate, and criticism regarding the respect, the protection, and the fulfillment of women's human rights. It also means to treat with respect and to encourage our women students to make full use of their legal training and this important and relevant practice and public service. That would be all for my part. Thank you, Professor Manubran.
Thank you very much, Virginia. There is a sort of common thread, a connecting thread between the presentations we heard from the Latin American perspective, but I'll let Ishan afterwards report on this issue. Thank you again very much, Virginia. But Virginia was actually born in Bulgaria. She's following the path of her fellow citizen Elias Canetti, the Nobel Prize of Literature, who was born in Bulgaria and afterwards became a world roamer. So she lived in France and now in Mexico for family reasons. So thank you very much to share your experience. We shall now shift continents, and I will leave the floor to Afton Titus from the University of Cape Town.
Thank you very much. I would just like to start by, again, expressing my thanks for the invitation to join this very impressive panel. I do feel very honored. In terms of how I plan to structure my own presentation, my presentation is very oriented towards the daily struggles that I face as a female academic. And I thought that it would be interesting if I were to present these in the order of from things that are just merely irritating to things that are more concerning. So to begin with, as a female professor, I don't look very old. And so I have a problem with students not recognizing my authority. So it becomes very difficult because Magdalena's presentation resonated with me. Because I don't know if it's as a woman or just generally, I am very passionate about my field. So when I came into academia, I had the choice whether I should model myself on some of the professors that had trained me, or whether I should just find my own way. And eventually, as things go, I found my own way. And part of my own way is just being very excited about what I have to teach. And as I found that level of excitement, that level of almost, having some sort of distance between yourself and your actual research field, translates into a double-edged sword with my students. Because on the one hand, my passion for my field brings about their interest in the field as well. But at the same time, it seems to break down the distance between myself as a professor and them as the student. So I find this often, especially now when I am teaching virtually. I thought that it would be easier for me to stamp my authority as being a professor, just like any other male professor that they've encountered before. Instead, what I've found is that as I teach and I become more passionate, they just categorically refuse to use my title. I have an associate professor title, I have a doctor title, I use it in all of my communications with them, and they just completely over their heads, don't care, just it's after this, after that. And it is quite frustrating considering that, these titles aren't just handed out. You had to work really hard for them. I worked exactly as hard as some of my male colleagues, if not harder. And yet they don't seem to be concerned about that at all. Now, something like this, it is something within my own control that I do try to sort of fix. And I do that by categorically correcting them every time that I haven't given you permission to use my first name, that even though we look maybe like we may be in the same age range, we actually are not. And that I would prefer if you speak to me in this way. Look, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And also sometimes I don't have the energy to constantly keep doing the same thing over and over again. So sometimes I will look at it and sometimes I will just let it go. Then an interesting thing that has happened is that, and something that I found that I could fix, was before COVID, I had an office near my male colleagues. And the strangest thing happened is that whenever there were visitors to the department, and I mean, it's not a small department, it's a department, people would deliberately walk past the wide open doors of my male colleagues to come and inquire through my half open door if I knew where Professor so-and-so was, if I knew when Professor so-and-so would be back. Like, I am a timekeeper and I keep track of all of my colleagues because, of course, as a female, I must know where everyone is. So that was very frustrating. And that was something that I could fix. I asked if I could be removed from this particular office and placed in a more quieter part of the building where if you wanted to find me, you had to deliberately find me. And I know this doesn't really meet the underlying prejudicial thoughts that go into this sort of interaction, but it made a massive difference to my daily life. And so I'm glad for that particular decision. Then, on a more serious note, as an academic and a female academic in tax and international tax law, I'm finding it very difficult to sort of get my name out there. I mean, I publish as much as everybody else does, if not more, and I'm trying very hard to attend the right conferences. But it becomes very difficult to do that. And as it's been explained to me, in my particular field, the prejudice for people with names that are not quite as known is because, so it is said, that there are younger people in the past who have written extremely good papers and then sort of just disappeared from the field. So now the theory is that they wait for you to get the right things, get your PhD, get your titleship, and then at some point you will be allowed into the inner fold of the academy. Now, I am still waiting for this to happen. I finished my PhD last year and I was promoted as an associate professor last year, so maybe it's still early days, but I am waiting for this. Now, this particular issue, I found that I am slowly beginning to address to make a smaller issue in my life. So I've been very fortunate that I took this opportunity just out of the blue to meet, I was determined to meet this particular influential academic in my field, and she's in Canada. And she was voted one of the top 50 influential people in international tax law. And as it so happened, I came across her profile and I told myself, you know, I'm going to make an effort to meet her somehow. And as it so happened, you know, you put that out in the universe, and then I got an invitation to attend a conference in Canada. And I thought to myself, this is it, I'm going to do it. So I attended the conference, and when it just so happened she was there as well. And you know, it's a long flight. It's 2 long haul flights to get from Cape Town to Canada. And I left at a time when my daughter was a year old, and my husband was left with her alone to try to sort his own practice out because he has his own law practice, and me going off on this adventure. And you know, the entire 2 long haul flights, I'm thinking to myself, is this worth it? What am I doing? I'm giving up time with my daughter to go on this trip that I'm not even sure is going to be worth it. And you know, you wrestle with this. And you think such crazy thoughts like, what if the plane goes down? I'm never going to see my daughter again. And I made this decision to leave her right now. In the end, I did. She was at the conference, and after her presentation, I marched over to her and I told her about myself, and I said, I'm very interested in what you do, and I actually just want one thing from you. I have a paper that deals with Canadian tax law, and I would love if you could look at it. And she took one look at me and she said, you know, I've been waiting for someone like you. And then it turned out that she's working on this this project that involved sort of overturning some of the international tax law assumptions that we have that are obviously built towards developing countries. And she felt that she couldn't properly push this project forward because she's from the North, and she was looking for someone interesting from the South to try to, you know, help with this presentation. And here I came, just marched into her life. So that was really good. And the good thing that came from that is that this professor that I met is really one of the most supportive academics I've ever come across in my whole career. And that includes also the time that I spent as a lawyer. And through her, I was able to meet other female academics who are equally supportive. And I'm now so glad that I have a network of female academics in my field that I can call on when things become a little too tough, when I'm really not quite sure what to do. For example, if there is any ads that come out, if I'm really ready to go to a different country, apply for a new job, you're trying to find a tenured position somewhere, and then they would give me advice and tell me, no, this is not really worth it, and so forth. And so it's through people like her that I've begun to realize that, academia is tough for women, but there are pockets within academia like this one that I hope, where you could find women who are supportive of each other, supportive of their journeys, and able to provide you with the necessary kind of understanding that you don't perhaps get with some of your colleagues. And so in the end, I was extremely glad that I made that brave decision to take that very long flight because it did work out in the end. And what she's also showed me is that these group of female academics are extremely aware of how citation works and how it often is that you would have many papers authored by males who just happen to cite all males in their papers. And so what they've done is they keep track of each other's work and they make a point of always citing each other. And so in that way, it becomes mainstream, and then you are able to get the necessary references and citations going. So I thought that that was very handy, and it's certainly something that I would do going forward, to deliberately try to find work authored by females that perhaps say exactly the same thing as men. And why shouldn't I cite a female in that case? So that's what I'm doing. And then on a more personal level, Patricia's talk about the cultural roles of women has resonated with me, particularly in this pandemic situation where we are at the moment. So what has happened is I have an underlying health condition which makes me more vulnerable to COVID. So that means that I am essentially cut off from every single support structure that I otherwise would have had access to help me raise my daughter, run a household, and be a wife, and still have my own work. So what it's meant is I work from home, and I never stop working because I have my own job as an academic, and there are dishes to do, there is laundry to do, there is housework that never ends. And so it's extremely difficult to try to find a block in my space where I can just focus on one particular role. What has also made it difficult is that my husband runs his own law practice. So, it's just a whole set of another layer of argumentation that I don't want to go into, because obviously if he doesn't work, he doesn't get paid. But I have a steady job, and I'm at home. So, why wouldn't I see to the house? So it's very difficult to sort of get over that sort of thinking. And I mean, it's just the idea also that I found is people think that, well, if you have the time to do the housework, it must mean you don't have deadlines. It must mean that you don't have other things to do. I do. And so I don't know if I've also watched something recently that also resonated. Someone said, are you aware of the lawyer's dilemma? You have sleep, family, fitness, and work. And as a lawyer, you only get to choose 3 of those at any one time. So that's what I found my life has been. So, before COVID, I was trying to finish my PhD. I have a young child, I have publications to get out. And so sleep was the thing that I gave up all the time. And now, with the pandemic, where my fitness and my health has become a real concern, it's the work that's beginning to take the sideline because I've got family to see to. I have to keep fit. I have to look after myself. And I have to sleep because that is part of being a healthy person. And so it's something that I do struggle with quite often. And to be honest with you, this is a discussion that I've just decided to have with myself because it's just, It causes too many disruptions to try to change things during a pandemic when everyone is struggling. So I'm just trying to do what I can to get myself through this particular period. And I am telling myself that I will recover my former productivity once, the world is a better place and we have a vaccine for everyone and everything. So I hope that day will come soon. But until then, I've sort of divided my day as best I can. And we will see if perhaps I can recover my productivity when the time comes. Yeah, I think that's me.
Thank you very much, Afton, for this South African perspective. I think that the first part of your presentation found an echo with what Patricia said, relating her experience in class, namely the relationship with some male older students. In Brazil, it would be male older students, because in the master's and PhD program in Brazil, many of the students are not as young as in European countries, for example, or in the United States. And it can be a tough time for younger professors in general, be it male or female, but of course it could be more difficult to be a young female professor, having heard of older male students, and apart from lecturing and discussing, having to deal with other sort of prejudice and bias and patronizing comments sometimes. So the objective now is to compare these experiences which we heard with the Asian and European one. So I will therefore leave the floor to Ranjana first from India, and afterwards to Rumana from Bangladesh. So Ranjana, the floor is yours.
Distinguished colleagues, I am grateful for having had this opportunity to present my views today. I thank Dr. Nidish Monibran for inviting me. The United Nations is aiming at having a 50-50 gender representation by 2030. Will we get there? Academic discussions like these will make sure the world gets there. Every constitution in the world has been built on the fabric of equality. Article 15, Clause 3 of the Indian Constitution is devoted to the regime of gender. The Constitution addresses associated issues such as status of women, representation of women. There are many laws to protect women in India, but are the laws sufficient? Let's look at the employment scene in India. India has a huge employment gap. Only 18% of the women are employed, while 75% are men. Gender division existed since the inception of society, and the gap continues today. The Supreme Court of India has passed important judgments imparting gender justice. In the Secretary, Ministry of Defense versus Babita Punia and others, the Supreme Court held that women short service commission officers in the Indian Army are entitled to permanent commission at par with their male counterparts, regardless of their years of service. Similarly, in Union of India versus Lieutenant Annie Nagaraja and others, the Supreme Court held that both male and female officers are to be treated equally in granting permanent commission in the Indian Navy. The recent changes happening in India have made this discussion on this topic all the more relevant. There have been many studies conducted on women and their role in the legal profession, but there are very few discourses empowering women in legal education. More clinical studies such as these are required. I think there is better progress made by women who are in the legal profession. In India, a brilliant, well-known lawyer, Menaka Guruswamy, has been designated as a senior advocate of the Supreme Court at just 46. But have academicians reached higher positions at the same age? It's interesting to see on this panel, we have associate professors and deans. Teaching was always a woman's profession, but at 46, in India, we don't see many women who are in positions of vice chancellors, directors, and even women principals in law schools in India. It is the academician who trains the future lawyers and judges. It is the academician who brings stories on discriminations in law to the young students. The experiences which are brought into the classroom will give a voice to the law. It will help to shape the minds of tomorrow who will become lawyers, judges, and maybe even help to shape the law. We need more women in higher positions in legal education to see such a change of laws. It's time to take a look at the law schools in India. Today, men and women enjoy the same rights to enter the legal profession. However, many parents are still apprehensive about their daughters choosing legal education. It takes a lot of convincing, especially when girls have to travel to another state and be away from home to obtain that degree. India has made some decent progress, and many girls are seeking admissions in other states. Are there more girls than boys in law schools, one may ask? In few law colleges in India, 60% are female students at the bachelor's and master's degree program. These female students are seen actively participating in classroom discussions, moot court activities, clinical legal education, and cultural activities. In recent past, female students have performed better than male students. What happens to these bright young girls after a few years? In the first few years after passing out from law schools, the number of lady lawyers in courts is increasing. Men are very comfortable with the increasing number of lawyers in courts. They feel women are like flower pots in the courtroom. One day they will be married and will just disappear. As we go higher, in the Supreme Court, there have been 420 male senior counsels, while only 37 female senior counsels since its inception. One may also ask, do we have greater number of women judges in India? Some Indian legislations for women require women judges or people trained in psychology to understand issues relating to women. In the lower judiciary in India, there are a total of 15,959 judges, out of which 11,397 are males and only 4,409 women. I feel very proud that I'm from a state, Goa. The total number of judges in Goa in the entire judiciary is 50, out of which 30 are female judges. Many of these female judges have been my students. Across the 26 high courts in India, there are only 82 women judges, out of a total 1,079 judges. The Madras High Court has the highest number of women judges in the country. The Supreme Court of India right now is airing their views to find the first woman Chief Justice of India. The Supreme Court of India has seen only 8 women judges since inception, and only 2 judges ever formed part of the collegium. I'm going to turn my focus to academics. In India, we have had only 3 women vice chancellors who are heading national law schools right now. In the state of Goa, we never had a woman principal. My university never had a woman vice chancellor. There is no women present on the governing council. Unfortunately, we have only 1 women faculty who heads most of the committees at my college. The appointment panel does not have women representation. But yet at the same time, after completing masters in law, we see many women entering academia as assistant professors. The question is, what happens to them in a few years? Although more focused studies are required to identify why women are giving up on a career in legal education, those women who really want to make a career sometimes are told you are too ambitious, you must go back home, you must concentrate on your family, or why do you need to work? You have a husband to provide for you. Recent studies also show that women have slow advancement and long working hours. PhD is also a mandatory degree, and the Deloitte report on higher education in India finds few women enrolling for PhD programs. I'm very proud that in the state of Goa, I'm the first woman to complete my PhD in law in the year 2014. Many law schools and universities in India do not have PhD departments, and women have to travel to other states to complete a PhD program. How are women balancing work and family? On a personal front, it has been a challenge even for me. We have limited amount of leave. I remember a time when my father-in-law had taken severely ill. He had to be hospitalized. I had to be with him. There are no provisions for women to avail leave in such situation to take care of the elderly. Such challenges force many women to quit the profession. The COVID-19 pandemic has enabled us to work from home, but before the pandemic, such liberties were never granted. How does one get promoted? The legal education is governed by UGC regulations, which are also known as the minimum qualifications for maintaining standards in university. These regulations were revised from time to time in 2011, 2013, and 2018. Promotion depends on the ordinance which was prevailing at the time the person joined the profession. For example, it would take me 13 years to move from assistant professor to associate professor. Right now, I'm at assistant professor stage 3. A person has to fulfill a required score to secure promotion. The academic score is built by publishing books, writing articles, presenting papers at seminars, conferences, workshops, undertaking research projects, delivering lectures at national and international institutions, completing a MOOCs program of a minimum 10 modules. A faculty also must complete faculty development programs like 2 refresher courses of 21 days each, 1 orientation program, and 5-day short-term training programs. Most of these faculty development programs and conferences in respective subjects are sometimes not conducted in a home state. As a result, women have to travel away from home, leaving their family behind, which may make it very difficult. Only recently, the UGC has recognized online programs as valid faculty development programs. Surely, women in India are conducting research and publishing articles. There have been many women who are into very good academic writing. However, there are only a few Indian law textbooks which are prescribed in the curriculum as compulsory reading material for law students. This is a male-dominated area. As the speakers have already mentioned, that work done by a man is more likely to be cited than work done by women. And in today's time, course content which is created in terms of videos is more likely to be liked and shared multiple times than course content created by women. Women are walking on a tightrope all the time. Assistant professors in India have to spend 16 hours a week delivering lectures. Every good journal sets out a time frame for submission of articles. Many a times we are busy with college-related activities and find it difficult to write that article we so wish to write. As of 2018, the UGC has mandated that only those articles which are published in a UGC care-listed journal or a Scopus journal would be considered for promotions. In India, there are hardly 10 Indian law school journals which are Scopus journals. Conference after conference, we see men being invited as keynote speaker. Men are everywhere. They are making networks. Invitations to deliver lectures, participate in seminars, scholarships, foreign visits are given to people of choice and not of merit. Even when women are appointed on merit, it is important to ask, who decides this merit? Are there some hidden consideration? After working so hard, it is only natural for women to get credit for their accomplishment. Are they getting a credit? I would like to cite my own example. I was awarded a prestigious scholarship for research in the year 2014. I thought this might be a very prestigious moment for the institution. But on the contrary, I was not even congratulated nor felicitated by my colleagues. A male professor even remarked, "Now that you're going to a foreign country, please see that you arrange a scholarship for me to go next." There were times when male professors were felicitated for much smaller achievements. What happens after a woman has completed all the prescribed requirements? Even after completing all of them, and even after being promoted as an associate professor, there can be only one professor for every 10 assistant professors at a university. This makes it difficult for women to rise at top. Men are the preferred gender for the post of principal, and by rule of seniority, automatically get the professor's post. The good news is Indian laws have made progress. Many laws require women heading committees. This This is the law in the books, but the law in practice is that even if women are heading a committee, they are constantly guided by men. Their voices are silenced. As a result, it's a long journey, a never ending journey for women. Somewhere down the line, many women choose to give up the race. Finally, what can law schools do to help women? It's a very interesting discussion we are having here today, many of which suggestions could be incorporated at our own institutions. An institutional audit at the end of the year will help ascertain how many women were given opportunities to strengthen and grow during the academic year. Law schools have to be more supportive in helping women to carve their niche in the profession. Academic groups such as these must be created to help women to avail scholarships, present papers, publish their work, and most important, cite women's work. I hope after this conference, a stronger academic connect will be created here so that we may showcase each other's work. As Lyndon B. Johnson said, we have talked long enough about equal rights. We have talked for 100 years or more. It's now time to write the next chapter and to write it in the books of law. I thank Nitish for giving me this opportunity and for this lovely opportunity to meet the distinguished panel out here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjana, for accepting my invitation. I think that it was easy for everyone to identify common patterns in Ranjana's talk, and the same leitmotifs appear every time, isn't it? So I will now leave the floor to Professor Rumana Islam from the University of Dhaka in Bangladesh.
Thank you very much, Nitish. A very good evening to all of you from here in Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh. Many thanks to University of Brasilia, Nitish and Ishan for organizing this event and inviting me as a speaker. Surely this is a wonderful experience to share my experience as being a law professor as a woman in Bangladesh with the fellow comrades that I see that represents almost every part of the globe. Well, just to clarify that I became a full professor only in the year 2019. So rather, I would like to share my experience as being a women academician in Bangladesh for the last 16 years. It sounds a long time, but it seems just the other day that I started my teaching career back in 2004. So I would like to just share my personal experience in a more informal way of being a law professor, as a woman in Bangladesh. So if you have an idea, Bangladesh is a country where we have a very strongly patriarchal society with very orthodox values, whether it is moral, social, or religious values. So it's a country actually where teaching is regarded as one of those jobs which rather suits the women best in our society, because it's safe, it's respectable, it's a decent job, and then you don't have to face other challenges if you pick up other professions. So if we even go back to pre-independence, even teaching was a profession considered to be a profession for the women, because as already my previous speakers, many have highlighted that women have other responsibilities to carry, so that rather if you are in a teaching profession, you will have enough time for the family. So if you want to opt for a career in this country, for a long time, they have chosen their career as teaching profession, whether it's a school teacher, it's a college teacher, or if they get the opportunity to become an university teacher. But obviously, there has been a very drastic shift over last 2 decades, and now I can assure you that women in Bangladesh are in almost every profession, including the running the country itself. We have a female prime minister. 2 main opposition leaders of the countries are also female, and the speaker of the parliament is also a female. So what was my expectations? What was my experiences? The first experience that I would like to point out that from the women law professors, there was an usual expectation. So when I started my career back in 2004, and that was a decade, like the whole decade during 1980s and 1980s, and even in the beginning of 2000, women professors were engaged and they were expected to research on a particular areas of law which had something to do with women, especially in Bangladesh, because women, if you are a law professor, a female law professor, it was obvious that you will be dealing with women rights, gender discrimination, violence against women, and family law. So these were very typical stereotype research field that was expected that if you are a law professor, obviously you are expected that you will engage yourself only to those areas of law. So it was quite a cultural issue. So even in terms of allocating the subjects, it was like, okay, the family law would be taught by a female faculty rather than a male faculty because it's more of a women issue. So it took a few generations for the law professors, women law professors, to get out of that stereotypical box. But obviously, to avoid any misunderstanding, I do strongly recognize the need that the women law professors should take in this country when it comes to the foregoing issues. But also at the same time, it's now time that I feel strongly that women law professors also should claim their authority with their male counterparts in other segments of law in all the other branches. So being a law professor, when I chose my career and when I wanted to pursue my higher studies, both me and my friend who topped in our university, when we applied for Cambridge for our LLM, we just determined one thing, that we are certainly not going for women issues or family issue. Both of us did our specialized LLM in commercial law, an area where rather very relatively law students or law career women was picking up the international law and commercial law. So in terms of my experience as a law professor, there are certain things, there are certain challenges that you face. Obviously, as being a woman in our society is quite challenging. And being a law professor, I teach in the university, which is the top university of the country. But still then, broadly speaking, when it comes to other issues that you have an expertise in other areas, there was a lack of recognition that women as a law professor, you are supposed to be specialized in only on those areas and not other areas. So when they invite us for a talk or a conference or whenever there is a program, so they don't invite us for other areas like commercial law, economic law, international law. So when there is a women issue, even if I don't know the women issue, I was always invited. So when there was an UNDP collaboration with the law faculty on CEDAW, so it was expected that obviously the female faculties would be joining it, and I did it, which I enjoyed obviously. So somehow, even if you wanted to keep yourself away from those issues, somehow you end up doing it at some point of time. In terms of student expectation, I think someone from South Africa, she highlighted the issues about control and authority, and the same goes also here in Bangladesh. And for in our society, the students judge more of female faculties rather than they judge of male faculties. So it's always like, even when I was a student, both regardless of boys and girls, they will be talking about the female faculties, what they are dressing, how they are dressing, whether they are dressing cool or not. So a particular dress code was expected from the female faculties, and it was expected that you will be something like a trendsetter. You will be setting out your own style statements so that we can see, oh, okay, Professor X and Y has this style statement, so and that. So it was always expected from a female faculties, but certainly not from a male faculties. And the country I belong to, for the female faculties, students expect that they would be wearing a particular dress code, like for in Bangladesh, if you know, the national dress is the sari. So they always expect that, okay, the law professor, female professor would be wearing saris. She would be wearing like a perfectly in a formal always in the class, but that is never expected from a male professor. So if you go in your jeans and t-shirts, it's fine. But if I go like that, I would be certainly subject to be criticized. In terms of authority, yes, that is also an issue that the student thinks that the male professors can be hard, they can be rude. But in terms of the culture that I come from, a female professor is regarded that she would be having more a motherly approach, more a sisterly approach. So you can't exactly be very rude or very strong enough. So you can ask all kind of favors from a female faculty, but certainly not from a male faculty. And there are also one issue that many of my female faculties have faced in our university. We did find, like many students, and as well as some of the employees of the university, they very easily call us Appa, which in Bengali means an elder sister, but you will never find that they will be calling a male faculty as Bhai, which means a brother. It's always sir. But when it comes to male faculty, female faculties, they think, okay, she's like an elder sister. We can simply call her Appa rather than saying Professor Rumana or Madam. But if it's a male faculty, even if he is a lecturer, they would be certainly calling him a sir and certainly not a brother or bhai or anything like that. So this kind of patriarchal mindset that exists with everyone. Many of my previous speakers have highlighted the issue of recognition. Obviously, this is a societal issue. I won't say that I have been discriminated, but at times I did also feel that if I was a male professor, I would have been more recognized in my field of area as an expert. But just to share with you a good news, very recently I have been nominated by the government of Bangladesh to the panel of arbitrators at World Bank's ICSID, and I was the first female, the first law professor to be in that position. So I think that's a big recognition. And it's not often too many times that in this country that professors get recognition at the international level by the government. So for me, it was a good recognition, and I thank the government, obviously, for that recognition. In terms of challenges, I never did any data collection or qualitative or fieldwork kind of research, but my colleagues who did that, again, coming back to the gender issues, we belong to a society where there are certain hours of time where if you want to go outside, you have to be accompanied by a male partner. You cannot go to everywhere, every places. So if you are looking for a research assistant, even the female professors, they prefer that, okay, let's take a male research assistant because he will be able to going into the slums, into the maybe jails, into the Rohingya camps to collect the data and everything. That wouldn't be possible for a girl, because if I want to take a girl, I have to arrange a special kind of accommodation for her safety, for her security. And there are all other kind of issues that I actually do not feel comfortable to have a female student as my research assistant. And that obviously, even I do not want to make a gender discrimination. These are the practical issues that I have to take in mind. Many already have highlighted the career development issues. Yes, I was fortunate enough that I could complete my PhD abroad in a good university. But many in my university, my colleagues, I have found that they had to sacrifice actually their career and their higher studies for their families. Many had to sacrifice just going abroad to do their PhD. They just did within Bangladesh. Another issue is in terms of decision making. So I think one already has highlighted, Ranjana has highlighted in terms of administration issue. In comparison to other professions, there is less discrimination in terms of gender parity in the university. Still now, women are quite a good number in the academy, at least the university that I teach in terms of sexual harassment or other things, so far nothing has been reported. Also might be for the reason that there is a social taboo of not speaking about those issues. But certainly we do also face all kind of comments. And when it comes to with teaching, that's fine. But when it comes to the decision-making bodies, like they're taking the leadership, as for example, in my university, we have the Dhaka University Teachers Association, and then we have the government bodies like the Senate or the syndicate. There is a very less women presentation. And whenever women are trying to contest, there is always this issue raised that whether she will be able to lead the body, whether she will be able to give enough time for those bodies which request more hours, and whether a female is good enough to lead those decision-making bodies. So we did have different law professors as chairmen, deans, and we had also a pro-vice chancellor. But still then, when it comes to decision-making bodies, women representations are all very much lacking. And obviously, we do face many kind of comments which are misogynic comments, which just showing that they have less faith and confidence when there is a question of women leadership. So that's an area, I think it also is a reflection of the country that we belong to, that culturally women are shy, they don't speak up, they are not aggressive. So male professors are the one who can take the lead, and they are the one who needs to dominate, who needs to control. So these are my few experiences. And also I have found that whether it is the students or my other colleagues, there is this kind of perception that women are not intellectual enough in terms of jurisprudential or philosophical terms. It's always the men who can think more intellectually. Women rather have just earned the degrees, they have all the informations, but they actually cannot go into the depth of all those information and interpret in terms of intellectual interpretation or jurisprudence interpretation. So when even the students also, like they think that the male law professors are more intelligent, they know more rather than the female professors. So again, this kind of issues of patriarchal understanding and perception prevails in terms of the attitude towards the female professors, whether they are the students or other colleagues. So Bangladesh so far has been done good in terms of gender equality and other things, but still there is a long way to go. There is a very, very long way to go, because Ranjana just highlighted that many female law students actually does very well in terms of all kind of academic and non-academic activities. It's same equals true in the law school of Bangladesh. It's always the girls who are being first, second, third. It's always the girls who are doing good in moot courts. But if you look into the courts rooms, you wouldn't find too many. Like I myself did not seek the legal professions because of all the kind of environments. I rather choose more of a safe, secure, respectable profession where I could flourish more easily rather than taking up the challenge. But girls these days are going to the courts. Things are changing, but there is a lot of things needs to be changed. So I hope again things will change, not only in Bangladesh but in everywhere. Whether it's the environment, in our mindset, things has to be changed. And I again thank Nitish and the organizers to give me this floor to share my experience with everyone. Thank you.
I'm the one to thank you, Rumana. Thank you very much again. To use Magdalena's image, with your permission, let us now continue this knitting of experience journey, which will lead us to Kuwait, where Bashair shall give us a portrait of her experience as a law professor at the University of Kuwait.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Nitish, for this kind invitation. And I extend my thanks to University of Brasilia to host us in a very interesting topic that we are all, I think, sharing the same struggle, if I would say, or the same thoughts. I really relate to most of what has been said already, and I feel that a lot of the points that I wanted to discuss already mentioned by the other speakers. So, and I think it's really important to relate us all together as female law professors, which is not often the case, to speak about the struggle that we're facing. Obviously, I'm from the Middle East, and I completed my postgraduate studies in Europe. And then I'm coming back to Kuwait with and deal with a male-dominated society, heavily male-dominated society. It's not an easy thing to handle. Also, it's not only a male-dominated society. The profession of law is hugely male-dominated. And I'm talking about being a lawyer, not even being a professor in law. Now, the case is different. You can see more females going into academia, and they like it because it's kind of, prestigious. However, they lack, as I say, the serious kind of attitude that male professors often have. So, speaking personally and very genuinely, to have it as a conversation, speaking about my case, obviously, I am young, and I was the first top one when I graduated from the university. So I was honored to give the valedictorian speech both in my high school and then in the university, being the top student on all the university. Obviously, this is something, doesn't happen every day in a society like Kuwait, but I worked hard and I got it. There is nothing to stop me. However, the society, the look, okay, she's studying all the time, she's at her home all the time, I don't care. When I went to be a lawyer in the law field, I often win my cases. And instead of being accredited for the arguments that I give or the papers that I represent, it's been often relate that, because she's maybe young lady, that's why her cases are passing through, bypassing all the other cases, which is, I find it a little bit insulting because, the papers are there, and me being a female that doesn't, and me successing in cases, not because I'm a woman, no, because I presented a good argument. So, even in meetings, when I conduct the conversation often goes to the direction where I want it to be, and they often related to me being a female. So I'm fed up. I gave 2 TED Talks, by the way, about me being a female in the profession and me being, let's say, it's called Let's Stop Stereotyping. They're on TED. So it is a serious, ongoing struggle for myself. After that, I'm a professor of law in the university, and I would say 60 to 70 of my students, 60% to 70% of my students are older than me. Why? Because in the law school, we sometimes have the students from the police force or the army force that are obliged to have their law degree. So I'm young and I'm from the Middle East. I'm dealing with police officers and army soldiers who've been educated all their life or all their bachelor degree life of dealing with men only in a very and strongly patriarchal way. And then they found me as their professor, asking them to do homework, asking them to put their phones on silence, and asking them just to obey the rules. So you can imagine, some of them, they take it seriously. Some of them, they take it not. They don't take it seriously. And here where I, unfortunately, sometimes have to shift my attitude to be less friendly. I'm a very friendly person in nature, but I found that didn't work in my profession. Being genuine, being smiley, being myself, it doesn't often serve my case being a professor of law in a university in Kuwait. In Kuwait, we're in the Middle East, yes, but we have a French constitution, we have freedom of speech, freedom of right, but yet we're a tribal society. And I'm not covered. I go like this, and this is the way how I appear in front of my students. Some of them, they have children, their daughters are my age, and still yet they have to do their homework and give it to me on time and deadline. When the first year of me teaching, I found it really struggle. How can I control them, and how can I just make them obey? Surprisingly enough, the police force and the army force are more likely to obey the rules because they're designed to, they are they are used to just follow rules. So they were the most, students that I have, they arrive on time, giving meeting deadline, and they have a discipline. Others not. They take advantage. They try to come to the office every now and then to have a conversation, which is something I don't like. And after that, I won 3 awards, one in England and one in University of Durham, being the best presenter, and one was last year to be the international personality in the UK. The Kuwaiti newspapers exploded of me getting this reward and etc. And yet I relate with Ranjana, the faculty, the look, I mean, how did you do it, and how? And I mean, you're a female, and it's not the often character. So I got that. However, now I'm an advisor, and I'm actually the first advisor of the parliament, the Kuwaiti parliament, and advise on the very serious legislature on day-to-day basis, and also on political matters. And I'm now combining politics and law. And yes, I might run. This, as Afton said, took too much of my time, because me, being a female and doing what I need to do to stay in the position where I am, it takes much more than being a male. There is this extra effort that you have to put it just to prove that you are a successful woman in everything else that the society puts the woman in that position. I'm talking about home duties, or duties to family, or duty to appearance, or keeping in shape or fit, on all these, pressure, all that kind of pressure that women often face more than a man, just being more related to family and all this and homework. I find it really a struggle, and it really, affected kind of, my health well-being last year. But this year I got over it, as with the COVID and things became online, so I can do many things while I'm sitting in the same office, in the same place. So this is a huge relief. However, being in Kuwait or being in the Middle East, in the profession of law, you can't be yourself, and you cannot be nice all the time. I have 3 masters in law and a PhD, and yet when they came to advisors, all the advisors, like the other advisors, most of the advisors are twice in my age. When I went to the first panel, one of the government members, he asked for my name as the advisor, and he asked me, where is she? I said, it is me. And he said, no, I mean, I want to speak with Professor Bashir. I said, it is me, Professor Bashir. So he thought I'm her junior or her secretary or something. So it is the look, that you get, like, seriously, advising on governmental politics, law in that age, women, those things, they cannot digest, especially in the Middle East, easily. Tomorrow, we have elections. One woman is running only against, all male candidates. I was on the air, on the news just before this conference, and they asked me, what are the chances of women to win tomorrow? I said, unfortunately, I think it's 0. Because, the society still doesn't really, we had in the 50s or 60s where everyone is kind of revolutionary look, so women were everywhere. But I think now in the Middle East, and I'm speaking about Kuwait, there is some kind of, downgrade of this movement, that you really, if you're a woman, you really need to work hard, maybe twice as hard as men, to prove that you are fulfilling your decisions and fulfilling what are you doing. My colleagues, they are ministers, 2 female ministers. Any mistake would be spread over the media 10 times more than a male mistake. Any speech, any wrong word in the social media will be retweeted, and it will be spread all over because it came from the female minister. So that's why they decided not to speak or not appear on the media, because the society take it really, I don't know, it's kind of, they don't really fulfill the job. And they require extra credentials. For example, to be a female minister, you need a PhD to start with, and etc., etc. However, to be a male minister, it doesn't take you but a good connection, working skills, and twisting the words, and this is basically how things work. In the academia field, unfortunately, most of the academic decisions are taken not in the meeting room, no, in a place we're called like a diwaniya, which is like a gathering place where they are friends after work, where I cannot go, not because I cannot, but I don't feel comfortable going, and all the decisions are made there. So they come and they know the decision already, and they just say it to you. They made their mind already. It's not an open panel discussion where I hear it for the first time. And this is really annoying me. Last week, I was invited by the World Bank to be the principal speaker to advise about Kuwait economy and Kuwait policies. I was chosen from all over the whole country. I've got this, and I thank you. I've got that letter, and I spoke, and they were all men, listening carefully and taking notes. And then obviously they're World Bank, so one of them is based in Kuwait, the rest are not. So I received the comments that we never knew that Kuwaiti women have that much of awareness, and we want to take the collaboration further. Why is it the branding? Is it so? I would blame the lack of opportunity. I'm not saying I'm not taking opportunity. No, I'm taking all my opportunities much more than the other male, which is my age, which graduated the same year I graduated. But because I really work hard, and I really work harder than anyone else in the faculty and in the in my own department. I do conferences all the time. I'm writing articles all the time. I'm on air all the time. I'm on the news all the time. I'm on TV all the time. This is what it takes me to do. And I don't see, I don't see my family as much, and I don't get enough of, the pleasure things. I don't get enough time to sleep or whatever. So that extra effort that we have to put as a woman is something I really hate. So I wish from coming into this lovely discussion that we could at some point stay all of us in touch, and we have the same share the same aim that, hopefully sometime in the future, the vision or the how women is looked at is neutral, because currently in Kuwait and in the Middle East is like quota. We need to look good in the eyes of international organizations. So give us a female minister now, just to tick those kind of, human rights, women empowerment, all these scales, so we look good in front of the international organizations. There is no serious digging for women empowerment or skills or credentials. No. Oh, we just need women here, one woman there. We're good. The ministers, they come 16, 2 of them women, 1 man. We're good. We have women empowerment. That's great. And this is unfortunately how it works. So I thank you everyone for listening to me. And I think we're all sharing a struggle. And I would really love to stay in touch with all of you. And again, I thank Professor Natish, who I have this great relation with him since long time, sharing different conferences. So, and I thank him again for this brilliant idea, and him being a man, listening to us and creating all this. This is much appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, Bashir, for your participation and for giving us this Kuwaiti insight on one hand, which on the other hand reflected many of the comments we heard already from our colleagues from all these different countries. So I would now like to pass the floor to Professor Laila Shukroon from the University of Portsmouth to give us her experience in the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Nitish. A very good morning, very good afternoon, very good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank the organizers and in particular Nitish for this very stimulating discussion and very kind invitation. It's a pleasure being in Brazil, if only we were in Brazil, really. So my name is Leila Shukroun. I'm full professor of international law. I specialize in international economic law. I'm the director of my university theme in democratic citizenship, which is a research program across all faculties. I'm the only woman in the senior leadership research team. The other persons are 10 to 15 years older than me, and they are men. I'm the only woman professor in my law school, and of course, as I said, the only research leader. I'm the editor of 2 book series, the co-editor of a journal, the co-chair of a Learned Society. I've worked and lived in 6 different higher education systems across the world, in France, in China, Hong Kong, the Netherlands, India, and the UK. I taught in probably 20 different countries in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America. So why am I providing you with a sort of mini CV? It's not because I'm so immodest, but just simply because I'd like to ask a few questions here. I've listened to all your experiences with great interest, and it's fascinating and horrifying at the same time, but I'd like to play a little bit the devil's advocate here, because to me, if you ask a question, does it matter or does it make a difference to be a woman? My response is going to be no, it doesn't. And I hope you're not going to hate me saying that, but really, on the basis of my own experience and what I've observed in different countries, different situations, in a way, it just doesn't matter. It's not that I'm denying all the sexism, the misogynistic behavior, the domination, the subjugation, and of course, all the forms of grave harassment, including violence, sexual violence, misconduct, abuses, all the horror stories we've all witnessed. For some of them, we have lived. For sure, there is a lot of violence, there is a lot of subjugation, there is a lot of problems everywhere in the world, and certainly it depends where you live, certain problems are worse. But to me, again, if you ask me the question, does it make a difference? No, it doesn't make any difference. So the reason I'm going to say that, or I'm saying that, I'd like to explain that, is because I'm taking a slightly different perspective. I'd like to come up, or I could have come up with lots of statistics, tell you that there are less women professors, that there are less MPs, and so on and so forth. But that's not the perspective I wanted to take today. I wanted to take a slightly different perspective. This is based on a number of thoughts or ideas I've been thinking about for a while. One is this famous sentence from the French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir, when she says, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." I think that's something quite important in terms of identity, belonging, perception, and realization. And my sort of presentation is going to revolve around that. Also, you have Judith Butler when she says that the idea of identity is as free and flexible, and gender is a performance, not necessarily an essence. So maybe I'm a queer, maybe I belong to the queer sort of theory without thinking about it or without realizing it, rather. But I like this idea of fluctuating identity and performance. So the first question I'd like to ask myself, and maybe I ask yourself as well, what's your identity? Do you see yourself as a woman? If you ask me this question, I'll tell you, no, I don't. I don't see myself as a woman, in the sense that it doesn't define me. There are plenty of things which define me. Being a woman is one of them, but this is certainly not my identity. Why is that? Because it's very subjective again. As we said, it's fluctuation, it's a performance as well. Now, in terms of belonging, do I belong to the category of woman? As surprisingly as it might seem to you, I don't belong to this category. This is not where I find myself. And here again, I'd like to use maybe another sort of concept or idea, this idea of intersectionality. There are so many things which define you as an identity or explain where you belong. The class, the caste in certain culture, the ethnicity, the culture, the taste, the religion, your interests. So again, it's very intersectional. So you may say, oh, you haven't had so many problems in China when you were working in China, or India because you're white maybe. So they saw you as a different category. Yes, maybe it's that as well. Then the question of, as I said, the question of identity, belonging, perception, something really interesting as well. Am I perceived as a woman? Well, I suppose I'm perceived as a woman when you see me. Am I perceived as a woman by my male colleagues, by my students? I don't think so. Not necessarily, actually. This is not my own experience, because I'm perceived as a specialist of something. I'm perceived as a good or bad professor, students, etc., but not necessarily as a woman. This is not the thing which characterizes me first and foremost. Then question of realization. Is it a problem to be a woman, to realize yourself, to achieve certain things? Again, I'm not denying all the experience which have been shared with this distinguished panel, but this has not been my experience. On the contrary, I think it has been an asset. I've never ever had problems to publish, never ever had problem to be chosen as a leader. I had the same problem as others, if you wish. It was hard, it was difficult, it is hard, it is difficult. I'm working immensely, I'm working all the time. I've made choices, but it has nothing to do with the fact that I am a woman. There's also something really interesting that we have touched upon a lot, but we have not really addressed. This sort of balance between your identity, your belonging, your identification as a woman or man or gender neutral, and your professional life and your private life. So this is here, I think that there is something which is slightly tricky, because in fact, you do make choices, or sometimes you're going to tell me you precisely can't make choices in certain societies because there's no support for women, and women have to do all sorts of things outside their work. But as far as I'm concerned, I've made choices which have helped me achieve certain things in my career, and maybe I should have not made these choices. So again, I'm sorry, I've taken quite different perspective, but I was very intentional to play this role of devil's advocate, because again, I could have come up with all the horrible statistics on the poor representation of women, on the fact that yes, there are plenty of women students, but they do not necessarily achieve the role of a woman professor. But this is a bit of and again, forgive me if I'm going a bit too far, but it's a bit of a cliche in itself. We know all that. So what? Why don't you ask yourself about who you are, your identity, whether you belong to this category, whether you're satisfied with all that, instead of saying, it's unfair, there are less women, we're underrepresented, it's harder. Yes, of course. And what's next? So again, many thanks for your attention, and sorry I've intentionally taken this sort of devil's advocate, thought-provoking, I hope, perspective.
Thank you, Leila. Of course, it was definitely thought-provoking because you brought another perspective, which does not in itself clash with what has said, but I see it in a more in a complementary way. You ended saying what's next, so I think that this statement, what's next, might be the next step, maybe another debate, future debate, which would take stock from what has been said today. And I think that the great international experience which you've had as a professor, as a professional in all these countries, support your statement, because as you said, maybe working as a professor in China, you are not seen as a woman, but as a foreigner, and working as a professor in France, you are seen as equal as your male colleagues eventually. So I think this part was interesting because you related the female professorship issue to identity, depending upon the country in which you are actually acting. So thank you very much for this very original insight and perspective. So I do not want to take the role of the debater, so I will immediately leave the floor to Eshan for his report on this debate.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. First of all, thank you to Professor Nitish for organizing this inspiring workshop, for making it happen, but also for inviting me to act as the reporter. Now, it gives me a great sense of privilege, but also pressure. privilege in a sense that it's a workshop which brings together such impressive and successful panel from so many different countries. And pressure, well, for the very same reason, but also because I would like to try to do justice to the conversations which have taken place today. Now, note that I use the term conversation, as each of these academics have, in a sense, they've shared their individual stories with us. This is very different from being presented with only statistics, okay, which tends to present more of a snapshot of the reality. So typically in terms of the gender representation and composition. Here we've had sort of a mixture of both. So we've been privileged to gain access to their shared experiences because what I think, perhaps with the exception of the last speaker, I've largely witnessed that despite the differences in countries, cultures, and contexts, there seems to be a connectedness between all of the stories. So there's a certain connectedness in terms of the characteristics and challenges that many of the panel have felt. Now, what I'll try to do here is, as competently as possible, is to try and capture the core themes from these critical conversations. Now, to highlight, first of all, some of the positives, so that obviously the first point is the group of inspiring women that we have here today have such drive, hunger, and resilience to succeed. Okay. There's also a level of agreement that there's some evidence of change that has taken place. There is a growing number of women academics, female students, and women in the legal profession. I say to some extent, there is obviously a lot of room for improvement. Now, the stories which have been presented today, we've got to remember that these are the stories of those who have actually succeeded in their career to a large extent, but they still face constant, and I should say unnecessary, challenges because of their gender. Okay, they still feel that they have to constantly prove themselves and overcome a number of stereotypes. One particular issue, which I think seems the dominant theme across the conversations, is culture. More specifically in this context, I'm referring to the patriarchal system, which seems to persist and produce and reinforce discrimination and bias in these different contexts. The inequality, discrimination, and bias seems to take both strong and very direct forms, but also more subtle and indirect forms as well. We had the example of socialization. I think Bashira mentioned it was quite a powerful and striking example of, I don't know if I'm saying the word correctly, but the Diwania culture, where basically men take decisions in a room separate. So it's almost like the women are part of the same house, but in a different room. Okay, which again is very striking because it seems to be many of the core decisions are made here. Then there was also mention of the stereotypes. Okay, what I think Afton mentioned about, this is not microaggression, by the way, when I use your first name. It's just at this point here, I think she mentioned about being viewed as a secretary to a male colleague. And then there was comments also about how the female academics are told, basically there's comments made about how they should dress and also not being offered late evening duties as well. I mean, these are all very clear stereotypes. Then there's also which seemed to emerge was the relationship with not only male colleagues, but male students who do not seem to treat the female academics as equals. And again, we see the microaggressions which exist, but also inappropriate jokes taking place as well. A further issue which was raised, I think, was the idea of the glass ceiling and sticky floor. Many of the panel felt that they were shut from a number of opportunities and that double standards were used. There was the mention of the division of labor, which seems to force them to make certain choices, which, let's be honest, you shouldn't have to make. You shouldn't have to choose between being a mother, for example, and an academic. Okay, there was a mention of the lawyer's dilemma, but the burden seems to be more on women lawyers and academics who have to tick more boxes. So again, that's another point which was raised. And also I felt many of the panel highlighted how they have been successful, but the success has not been recognized and acknowledged as it would have been had it been a male. And in many cases, it's by their own institution. Now, all of the above point towards, as I said, I would say a form of institutionalized gender inequality. Okay, whether this is conscious or unconscious bias, at the end of the day, the consequences remain the same for women. They reinforce and perpetuate gender inequality. Now, I tried to pick up as many references to solutions which were mentioned during the conversation. I think some of the common recommendations were to have a woman network of academics. So being able to share, support, and guide each other in the field. So create relationships and spaces where they can overcome the sense of isolation and make the success of women academics visible to students as well. So you're set, in a sense, you're giving a direction to these students as well. This ties in with the idea of having women mentors who can sort of, again, lead the way and lead by example in terms of what are the opportunities and how you can make your name in the academic field. Another point I think which is linked to mentoring and networks is the idea of role models as well. Today itself, the panel which I have in front of me, all of you are very successful and inspiring. I think in a sense that you can act as role models for other female students and academics who want to grow and enter this field. There was also mentioned beyond sort of the mentoring, networking, and role models, there was the idea of positive discrimination and the need for changes in the law. I think this is important because this is the only way that you can really fast track the necessary change. Okay. By first of all making the change in the law, it can then set the standard for others to follow. But I think where we need to be careful is that the changes, whether in relation to positive discrimination or legislation in general, it shouldn't just promote token representation. Okay, and the only way we can really overcome token representation, because I remember many of the panel mentioning about sort of being there just to sort of tick a box, okay, to make up numbers, but it's clear that there's no difference between the male academics and female academics, and if in many cases the female academics outclass many of the male academics as well. So there is no need for sort of token representation, because I feel that if they are taking their place, they will represent their place proportionately. However, I think to move beyond this, there's also the need, obviously, to overcome token representation, discrimination, and bias. We do need to change the mindset, because one of the main issues which seemed to emerge was the issue of culture. But the only way you can really change culture is by changing the way people think. Okay, that fits in with the idea of identity as well. So they need to, again, we need to embrace, for example, I think it was Patricia who mentioned the B side. I don't know if I correctly understood, but she sort of highlighted the need for feminization of legal education, which took the form of creativity, emotion, and affection. I think these are very important because they bring a broader dimension to legal education. So we do need to recognize the feminization of legal education to the extent that we can strike a balance. It doesn't mean moving all the way to the other side, but it does mean recognizing what a female perspective can bring on legal education. It's very similar to, for example, in the UK, we hear a lot about decolonizing the curriculum as well. So there's the idea of the westernization of, for example, international law, the decolonizing. I think we have to do the same with legal education in terms of the patriarchal aspect, which seems to still dominate to a certain extent. Finally, like I said, the last comment would be that we need a commitment to change. And very important, again, fits in with Laila's comments about identity and how you construct it. All of these issues are really socially constructed. I think she used the quote from Simone de Beauvoir, one is not born but becomes a woman. This idea of social construction also leaves the opportunity to deconstruct and even dismantle the current system, so we can reconstruct one which is more equal and empowering to everyone in the system. Now, again, I'm pretty sure that I probably missed a number of points. Nitish is probably better sometimes at capturing some of these points. So I will leave the floor to Nitish if he wants to add some additional comments that I may, points which I may have missed.
Thank you, Esha. No, I think that you brilliantly reported on the main points which were put forward by our panelists today. So I think it would be better to leave some time, like 10-15 minutes, for a general debate. If anyone wants to add something, comment, etc. So we have 10-15 minutes. Leila?
Thank you very much, Eshen, for the great sort of summary you've just made. You know, I'm a bit wary of all these discussions. And again, you're all going to hate me because you think that probably I don't care, or that I don't think it's an important topic. I do think it's an important topic, but I don't think it's the way to approach it. You see, recently, the Exit, for the first time, has appointed an all-woman panel of arbitrators. All right, so you may think that's great. I think it's completely artificial. It's completely sort of, you know, populist decision just to please people, because at the moment we're talking a lot about gender equality and whatnot, you know, Black Lives Matter. See what I mean? So it's completely artificial. This is not the way to approach the problem. And genderizing the problem, defining yourself as a woman, creating a woman group, a group of women supporter, making the curriculum more feminine. I have no idea what it means. Seriously, what does it mean? Making the curriculum feminine? Is like scary? What are we going to say? Or, you know, introducing cliche type of emotion which women are supposed to feel. I'm more sensitive, I'm more creative, I'm more gentle. No, I am harsh, I'm courageous, I'm bold, I'm fierce. See what I mean? So all this is extremely superficial and I think extremely counterproductive. So if you want to succeed as a woman, if you want to inspire as a woman, there are plenty of other ways to do it, but not in being a woman and seen in this category. That's my problem. When I see my sort of mentors who are hyper successful people, I'm thinking about Professor Stern, for example, at Sorbonne University, looking at Nitish, she was my prof. She's the #1 arbitrator in the world, beyond all possible men in the world. She has more than 100 arbitration. She's never, ever, ever came with the gender discourse. If you ask her, do you see yourself as a woman? She will never say that. She will laugh. Well, yeah, I'm not a woman. So this is really problematic to approach this problem in putting yourself into a box because you're a prisoner of your own identity.
Thank you, Leila. Patricia?
I'd like to make a comment on what Ishan said and a correction, and I also like to make a comment on what Leila said. So first of all, what Ishan said, that maybe it was me who said that bringing emotion into classroom was important for women or was an agenda, and I absolutely don't agree with that. I really agree with Leila in this issue. I don't think that, I think that this is a very stereotypized vision of women. That this vision that emotions are with women and rational thoughts with men. So I don't think this is really positive for us, and this is what I wanted to correct. This was not my idea. I think, and maybe it was part of Magdalena presentation, and maybe she can explain this to us later. But another thing that I would like to say about Leila's exposition is that I don't really agree with it in all the aspects. I really don't think of myself as a woman when I enter a classroom. I don't really think of myself as a woman when I work as a clerk in the tribunal. This is not part of my everyday concern. I think of being a citizen, a professor, and a clerk. But although I don't identify myself as a victimized, inferiorized woman, yes, I have my opportunities conditioned and limited because I am a woman, and this is a reality. And although I don't see myself as a woman, some students, yes, see myself as a woman. My other colleagues see me as a woman, and this is also limiting. And there are also, I think, cultural issues that make this gender-based limits more intense or not. And I think that it is different from being a woman in Brazil and in the UK. So, for example, when I had an experience abroad, I was very impressed with the level of equality that I could see in France, that I could see in either in the United States compared to what I had at home. I don't know if it's a real equality, but at least there is this this social code of things that you do. So, and it helps a lot. It does, especially when you have a president like we have at the moment, who is declaredly a misogynist president. The kind of things that he liberated in the public sphere are difficult to explain to someone who is not from our culture. So things here now in Brazil are getting harder to women just because we are women. And also the pandemic doesn't help, but I'm losing myself. I just wanted to say that the idea of bringing emotions into classroom was not mine. And that on the other hand, although I don't think of myself as being a woman all the time, I think that this is a condition that limits opportunities a lot.
Thank you. I'll follow the order of the raised hands. So Bashaya first, afterwards Afton, Leila, and Carolina.
May I say it was my idea, okay, the thing of the motion, just because I think it was a big mistake. It's not Patricia's idea, it's mine, just for saying that. So I have to go now. So thank you so much for your time. I haven't my vaccine today, so I'm really, really happy. So thank you so much. I'm sorry I couldn't stay until the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Magdalena. And great to know that you will be vaccinated very soon. So Bashaya.
Oh, hi. Well, thank you, Shan, and thank you, Leila and Patricia. Thank you, Leila, for this interesting insights, which I agree with you. And this is why I am who I am at this moment, because I don't think I'm a woman and I have to, no, this is not in my mind. However, it really depends where you are. You, as being a professor in the UK and in France, is 100% different than being a professor in the Middle East. And unfortunately, we face this discrimination in the Middle East quite heavily because we're women. Let me give you an example. I'm an advisor to the Kuwaiti Parliament. I don't feel comfortable going to the Parliament sessions because there is some fights going on last week and the week before. You can imagine, like I cannot, or I am not, accepted, in the news or in the media to be seen there where the MPs are hitting each other. That kind of society I am in. So it is definitely makes a difference where you are. And coming from a tribal society, being young, not covered, trying to literally lecture them, it's not something easy. So we have the liberties of French. I studied in Sorbonne, and I'm a big fan of our constitution, but when you come to the real ground, it is 100% different. So I thank you, and I really appreciate your point. However, it really depends. In the Middle East, we need more time.
Thank you, Bashaya, for your comments. Afton.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Leila, I just wanted to thank you for being brave enough to put forward this alternate viewpoint. I think that you were successful in your attempt to, encourage comment. I would just like to say that I hear that it is wonderful that you are in a country where you are able to adopt this position. I also think that in some countries, it does depend on where you are. And sometimes that thinking is actually a form of privilege, to be able to understand and think that sometimes certain aspects of who you are doesn't determine where you go. And sometimes it does. And sometimes it does quite realistically. What I would also like to say is that you speak about how it's your almost obligation to determine your own character, your own defining facets of who you are. But in dealing with other people, it's inevitable that their perceptions of you will be imposed upon you. And I think what panels like this, what we're trying to do is to recognize that firstly that occurs, and secondly, to try to provide others with support as to how to deal with situations like that. In saying this, I don't think that any of us on this panel are attempting to use our gender as a crutch to say that it's because of X that I haven't done Y. I think that for most of us, we are saying despite X, we are still doing Y. And I think that kind of conversation should be celebrated rather than trying to distinguish it from having someone else saying this conversation in a completely different context. I also just want to say that I don't think it's useful to dismiss the commonality across this panel. I think that it's a reality that we see every day where you have all male panels, otherwise called manels. So I don't see anything bad or anything in having a panel like this, where instead you have the opposite, all females. I think that what we are trying to do with a panel like this is just to encourage the conversation, to recognize that something should be said. And I think that in and of itself is useful. Having said that, I do understand, of course, that in the commonality of the stories that we have here, that correlation doesn't mean causation, but nonetheless, there is value to finding a common position across different continents and coming together to try to find a support base and a mechanism to deal with those kind of particular situations that just happen to occur to all women. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe to try to build bridges between the different interventions before leaving the floor to Leila. My contact with the discussion which we have been having today occurred in Brazil. It occurred in Brazil because I was living in France before, and I had more of a daily European background and culture and contact. And that's why I started my presentation by saying that one of the things which struck me in Brazil when I talked to my female colleagues were such issues, from inappropriate comments to more complicated power relation problems. These are, when I was in France, when I studied and worked in France, these issues were not on the main agenda, at least at that time. I don't know how it is today. So it was something different, maybe shocking for me, because it really felt like I was traveling in time, that even today in Brazil, some topics were still on the agenda. And actually, I did not say it by myself. I considered some of the happenings as being normal, and it was brought to me, to my eyes, by my female colleagues, by presenting, without trying to make a sub story here, but by just opening their own experience, I started noting that something might be different in their being a woman, in the sense that, as Patricia mentioned, and which echoed what Laila mentioned as well, that they do not, the colleagues, I mean, I talk to, they do not necessarily see themselves as a woman when they go to work, when they lecture, when they are in a directorship with their students. But something happens, and of course, I'm talking as a lay person here because I have not yet investigated all the causes, and I think it's not into my competence to do so as a lawyer, I mean. But there is something, at least here in Brazil, which make those female colleagues, or which recall these female colleagues that they are a woman. So it's cultural, as Eshan put it, but with all the efforts they put in order to extract themselves from this box, as Laila mentioned, somehow they're kicked into the box. And I think the problematic, the main conundrum here is, as Laila mentioned, what do you do next? And so in this next step, we do see here in Brazil as well some form of feminist extremism. Many people who would try to essentialize the gender aspect and think that everything is built as per your gender. And we also have, as Patricia mentioned, the other extreme side, which is well represented today by the Brazilian president, for example. And what is in the middle is something which I have not yet been able to grasp correctly. That's why actually I called you to discuss this issue. Do not believe that you are serving my doubts, but I wanted to set a platform to try to understand what do we have in between these two extremities, and your experience show that you do always try to do a step forward. In some case, it is successful, and in many cases, even though it is successful, there is something in the background. I don't know if I should say in the cultural background, which always remind you who you are in essence. And of maybe here the issue is cultural in the sense that maybe in France or in the UK, it is not as strong as it would be in Brazil, and maybe in Brazil it is not as strong as it would be eventually in Kuwait, for example. So it's a mere perception which I have, but I have not further studied this issue technically. I mean, in order to understand, I think we would need to do an anthropological maybe research on such questions. But the idea was to try to build a bridge between what Laila said and what Patricia and the others said. I think that these positions can be complementary at some point, and I also think that the cultural aspect is important depending on the grounds upon which you stand and talk, because in my, let's say, foreign experience in Brazil, this is something which I noted for quite some time, but it is very subtle. It used to be very subtle in society when I came here, for example. I needed my Brazilian female colleagues to point out the sort of gender bias, and until recently, it was for me still subtle, but I don't know if Patricia shared the same opinion. It really seems that something has been unleashed as from 2018 in society in general, and this has obviously a reflection at university, and this is also one of the reasons which contributed to putting up this discussion. So I leave the floor to Laila.
Thanks very much, Nitish. Yeah, of course, it depends on where you are, you know, and I'm quite admirative of certain career paths in different countries. And obviously, I'm looking at you, Bashaya, because I suppose that in Kuwait, it's not particularly easy, or even Brazil. But you know, it's beyond that. It's beyond the countries. As I told you, I lived and worked as a prof in 6 different countries, in France, in the UK, but also in the Netherlands, in China, Hong Kong, and India. So I have a relatively broad vision, and you'd be surprised to know that the country where I felt the most sort of problematic and uncomfortable misogynistic behavior is actually the UK. It's not India, it's not China, it's not another country. Why is that? Probably because of the political circumstances at the moment. Also because we keep talking about it, because we need to tick boxes with the Equality and Diversity Charter and all sorts of mechanisms like that. So we're constantly reminded of our condition while we don't even think about it. So there are plenty of different mechanisms here. And there's this concept I briefly mentioned of intersectionality, which is really important because, you know, being an upper class woman professor in India is much easier than being a lower class male professor. Well, a lower class male professor probably doesn't even exist. So it's extremely complex. And what I would not like us and people generally to do is to reduce this complex debate to the simple gender identity, because it's not only about that really, but I know nobody really wanted to do that today.
Thank you, Laila. Carolina?
Thank you, Nitish. Well, I think it is important to take into account the privileged place from which personal experiences as women law professors are analyzed. The cultural, social, and economic context means that for many women, and I count myself among these, we paradoxically benefit from bias that exists on women in law academy. However, it is important to be clear that women law professors who are in privilege are a few. And for this reason, I consider it very important to make this bias visible and generate empowerment process and projects, especially for those who are not in this privileged position. Gender bias are per se uncomfortable, like any critical stance, and I consider that for this, they must be very deep and hopefully generate spaces for change.
Thank you, Carolina. I don't know if someone else would like to comment or add something. No? Okay, so I would then make the closing statement. I would like to thank all of you for your very interesting and enlightening statement and experience. And I think the conversation, as Ishan put it, in general was very interesting. We had some disagreements on some points, but I think that disagreements help to answer to the question which Laila put, what's next? Many of the experiences which were shared showed a common thread which characterized the act of teaching from Uruguay to India by passing through South Africa. We saw a common pattern in all of these experiences, which means that there is something in the background, and that maybe the prejudice which were voiced do have some long dated roots. And I think the point with which I would agree with Laila would be, once we know this, once we know that there is prejudice, there is bias, what do we do? What is the way forward? And I think your respective careers as women professors obviously show that this hurdle can be overcome. You all did this, of course, maybe with more efforts, with more sweat, than, depending upon the country, than your male colleagues. And we should eventually maybe set another meeting, another agenda to discuss the other part about what to do next. But personally, I was very happy and satisfied and glad to listen to you all, because I did not know what would be the exact content of your interventions, but I could see that the only fact of talking about such issue was in itself maybe an achievement, something important for some of you. And I would like to thank you to have accepted my invitation. And as I mentioned, I had sent you an email in order to to invite you to publish your statements in the Brazilian Journal of International Law in the Chronicle section. I think it would be interesting to have your respective experience in a short 4 to 6 pages chronicle and to put these together and let our readers draw their own conclusions. As today we shall actually let all the persons who are following draw their own conclusions upon what has been said, upon your own experience. So thank you very much once again for your very kind participation. It has been a long morning here, afternoon and evening for others. So we shall keep in touch by email, as you mentioned, Bashair, and I shall send you more details about the publishing part during the following week. So thank you once again, and have a nice day or nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Email
Thank
and
you.
media, social media as well. Cool.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.